All righty, so welcome everyone. This is YouTube Live, and we're starting here at just 4 p.m. And the topic for today is how to discover the 3 mechanical errors that most yoga practitioners make that weaken the stability of their sacroiliac joints. And I'm going to be happy to share these with you. And these are 3 things that I see over and over again in students and even in yoga teachers, that there's some understanding about the pelvis that's missing. So to start with, the first pose I'm going to talk about that's mechanically compromising is practicing pigeon pose. So many students like to practice pigeon pose because they feel like there's some tension in their piriformis muscle, or they want to open their, quote unquote, open their hips. And so they do pigeon pose and they fold forward because they think that feels good. The problem with that is that it also weakens the back side of the body and overly contracts the front of the body. So very often people who come to me who have a hip problem or some sort of hip pain or SI joint pain, I'll ask them what their favorite pose is, and it's typically pigeon pose. So let me just show you this image. This is an anatomical image of some of the muscles of the pelvis. And, that's your gluteus medius right there. And then the next muscle below that is your piriformis muscle. And then there's all the groups of little small muscles that attach to the tailbone and the thigh bone that actually hold the base of your sacrum in place. It actually holds it in place. So along with the big ligaments of the sacrum, those muscles are working in concert. Now, when you do pigeon pose over and over again, you're taking those and you're stretching it and stretching it and stretching it and stretching it. And on the opposite side of that, which is where your psoas muscles are, it always is true in movement that if one muscle group has to relax and lengthen, the opposite muscle group is going to contract. So the psoas, which is probably already short from sitting at the computer or other activities, habitually crossing your legs, sitting at the computer, any kind of bending and lifting work, those of you who are avid gardeners, the psoas muscle is going to be pretty short. And if you do the piriformis stretch, bending forward over and over again, you're just going to aggravate the situation. So that's the first thing that contributes to pelvic instability. And some of that, how do I want to say that? So there's different ways that the pelvis gets asymmetrical. Let's just go back to the asymmetrical idea. That asymmetrical idea could be because you structurally have a scoliosis and one side of your pelvic floor is positioned slightly differently, or your sacrum and your hip bones are positioned slightly differently. It could be that you've had some sort of an impact injury, like falling on a hip or falling on your tailbone at some point, that makes the hip uneven. It could be that you're overstretching in your yoga practice and going for too much extreme flexibility without creating enough stability. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to mechanically correct your practice. So the first thing is you're going to stop doing pigeon pose and bending forward if you have a hip problem. And I'm going to show you this clock face. This is my favorite image. So this is the pelvic clock, and 12 o'clock is the top at the navel, 6 o'clock are the inner groins, and then 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, the 2 hips. And where they crisscross is going to be the pivotal point of the sacrum. So the sacrum has a curve. It's one of the 4 spinal curves. It has a curve. And that's that pivotal point. And that's the point that you're going to stabilize around the center of the clock face. That can also correlate to what's called the bottom of the belly, right? So it's a few inches above the pubic bone. And to stabilize that area, you actually need some strength in the transverse abdominis muscle. And we'll talk about that as we get into a couple of the poses that we practiced today. So I want you to be aware of that clock face because I'm going to refer to that. The other pose that's really difficult on the hips is Virabhadrasana II, sideways warrior. Over and over and over and over and over again, someone says to me, I have this pain in my hip. And I say, show me your Virabhadrasana II, and the problem lies there. So we're going to really go in depth with that pose in this first 30 minutes of the free live stream on YouTube. And then my membership group, who's also on Zoom with us, will continue on with our practices, and I'll get a chance to observe your practices and help you with those poses. Okay. So let's start on the floor, lying on our backs. So I'm going to come over to my mat and lie down. And now we're going to do a little bit of strap work. And I'm going to see what you can do about keeping your clock face stable. That means that the distance from one hip to the ribs on one side and the other side is equal. And I'm hoping you can see this all right in the live stream. I think you can. Okay, I'm going to back up just a tiny bit to help that. All right, so check your clock face, measure the distance from one hip bone to the ribs on each side, and you can pause and watch for a moment. And this is the way practicing strap work is recommended for somebody who has some kind of sacral imbalance. Now, there's 4 types of sacral imbalances, and I will go into those in more depth in the new Happy Hips training program that's starting March 15th. So that's my little side note. And I'm just going to start with strap 1, just taking the leg straight up in the air. And the first thing you want to really find out when you straighten the knee is what happened to the sides of the waist. Is one side shorter or more crimped? Did that hip swing out to the side? Did the sits bone travel away from the opposite thigh? Can you draw that outer hip down a little bit to even the sides of the waist? Stabilize 3 o'clock, align, I should say, 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and then tweeze that sits bone in, and then just open the back of the knee in 2 directions. So my inner groin is pretty balanced. I feel like I'm on the center point of my sacrum, and I'm going to remain there as I stretch that leg, and then I'll change legs. So we'll do one leg and then the other, not to confuse the body or confuse the perception of the mind by trying to do all 3 poses at once. So again, checking out sides of the waist, balancing the horizontal 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, tweezing the sits bone in, and then just opening the back of the knee in 2 directions. So it's keeping my sacrum and my pelvis very stable on the floor, and that's what we want. All right, and then I'm going to keep this leg up for a moment and show you the second version of taking the leg out to the side. So rather than swinging the leg out, and you know how you do sometimes, you swing the leg out and the opposite hip pops up and follows that leg. And that's an indicator of weak transverse abdominis and not enough stability in the hips, the psoas, and the transverse abdominis to keep the hips stable on the floor. So in that case, I'm going to bend the opposite knee so my knees are touching each other, and I have my hand on the bent knee and the strap on the straight leg. And then I'm just going to open both legs out to the side equally and come back together. When you do that, you're going to realize that your hips are really stable on the floor. And the only thing to check yourself on is, did you pull too aggressively toward your chest, making 12 o'clock smash into the ground? So I don't want my lower back to smash into the ground. I want to see if I can keep myself balanced on the center of my sacrum as I go in and out. And then I'll change legs. And I'll do the same thing. If you need to adjust your hips, always do that. It's a good idea. And then do the same thing with the other side, just coming out to the side evenly. Make it as even as you can, and back to center. And out to the side. Same distance. You can see with your peripheral eye, your peripheral vision, if the legs are going differently, if the hips want to rotate differently. And just notice how your body does with this movement. And then back to center, and then we're going to rest a moment and put both feet down on the floor. So we're going to have one more position to do, and that is the crisscrossing of the leg. So typically in Supta 3, lots of times you take the leg all the way over to the floor, but we're not going to do that when we're trying to address a pelvic weakness or instability. We're going to keep the clock face really stable on the floor so we can, in our minds, identify short muscles, long muscles, loose muscles, tight muscles. And name them that way for a reason. So I'm going to take my right leg up again, hold the belt in my opposite hand. And you see, I'm not being aggressive. The belt is, for me, fairly long. I'm not trying to grab my foot. I'm trying to leave my spine nice and long and stable on the floor. And then when you crisscross, I like to open up just a little bit, just because it sort of softens the groins when I open a little bit. It's not very far. But then when you exhale, go across and crisscross your knees. And you're going to find that's challenging. Many women find that very challenging. Crisscross. And that's going to help you find those tight muscles. So this is one way to begin stretching the piriformis muscle and some of those other hip muscles that are part of flexibility in the hips without disturbing the SI joints, so the gluteus medius and other muscles, without disturbing the SI joints. And also holding the thigh away from your belly and crisscrossing across and back and across and back. And surely, if you're joining me live on YouTube right now, I'm going quickly through these things. I want to show them to you, and you can always replay it. It just takes maybe 15 minutes for the tape to be ready again, and you can replay it and practice. So again, on the second side, I'm going to keep my hips in position. And then with the opposite leg, we're going to, whoops, I got a little cramp there. Hold on. They got mad at me. I'm talking too fast. Okay, and then crisscross and back to center and crisscross and back to center. And notice, use your breath and observe. See if you can keep your knees straight the whole time. If there's some imbalances in the hip, the muscles may be pulling differently at the knee, so the back of the knee may feel tighter on one side than the other. Just kind of observe how that feels. And then finish up and come back to center and rest a moment. Stretch both legs out, shake them out, and observe how your hips feel. And if you're not certain if you're even or not, just pick your head up for a moment, take a look. If you draw that midline down from the center of the forehead down through the breastbone, all the way down in between the feet from the pelvic floor, the legs hopefully are flopping evenly to each side. So just kind of check yourself on that. And then we're going to go into what's recommended, not just by myself, but other professionals who understand how the body's supposed to move, how to stretch the piriformis muscles without disturbing or dislocating the sacrum. So I'm going to start here with the knees bent and my hands at the tops of my thighs, the heel of my hands at the tops of my thighs, and then just press the thighs away and draw the bottom of the belly in and up toward the chest so you feel like your spine is elongated. And from that long, you also feel a little sense of traction in the lower back. So when I'm pressing the thighs away and then drawing the bottom of my belly in and up, I'm actually reminding my body that my sacrum belongs to my spine. It doesn't belong to my pelvis, it belongs to my spine. And I want it to stay connected to the extension of my spine. And that's something we can go deeper into at another time. All right, so then I'm going to cross my right ankle on top of my left knee and take the knee out to the side. And I want you to observe how quickly the pelvis wants to swivel to accommodate the movement of the knee out to the side. And then if you check on both sides, one side's long. In my case right now, it's twice as long as the opposite side. So I don't want that to happen. I'm going to show you with the other leg so you can see more clearly. I'm going to use my right hand very firmly at the top of my right thigh and press that thigh away from my belly as I draw the bottom of the belly up toward the chest. Now from there, I'm going to see if I can externally rotate the other leg without releasing the pressure on my right hand. So that pressure stays as I externally rotate and lengthen my spine along the floor. So as your body adjusts, you adjust. And that gives a little bit of stretch in the outside of that hip that's very secure. It's secure for your sacrum, and that's important for our topic today. And then I'm going to take that leg off and do the opposite side. This time my left hand is going to hold the top of the left thigh and press it away. And maintaining that firmly, lifting the bottom of the belly to the chest, I'm going to see if I can rotate the right knee out to the side and find out. It doesn't matter where you grab that leg. You just kind of grab it where you get the most control, because you're actually teaching your neuromuscular body and your fascial body the position and harmony that you'd like to create. You're actually teaching your body, and your body's teaching you. It's a two-way street. So let yourself work on that a little bit. And then exhale and slowly come out. Again, stretch your legs out and feel. Shake the legs out a little bit and feel. And then we're going to take that to the next level. So I'm going to roll to my right side. And for today's class, I'm going to use a chair, folded chair that's upside down. That's why you see this nice chair here. And I'm going to bring it up and put it on my mat. Now, typically you can do this. You can also put your foot on a wall, but I have the chair here, so I'm going to use the chair today so everyone can see clearly. So we're going to do the same stretch, hip stretch again. Let's see, this way. I'll go this way. Okay, so my left leg is on top, and then I'm going to pick my right foot up and put my right foot on the edge of the chair. So the foot's up off the floor. I'm going to hold the top of my right thigh. So what wants to happen is my lumbar wants to collapse toward the floor. But I'm going to press my hand into the thigh. I'm going to look for the midpoint of my sacrum. And then I'm going to externally rotate that leg. And you might even think about how the sits bones are relating to each other. Can you bring both sits bones so they feel like they're both pointing straight down away from your shoulders? And just kind of hold in, breathe a little bit, lift the bottom of the belly. Smooth inhalation and exhalations. Soft neck. And Tadasana in the foot. So keep the foot in Tadasana, keep the ankle square so that the knee is protected. And then slowly release. Return the feet down, pause a moment, and we'll go on to side 2. So I'm going to put the right ankle on the left knee, pick up the right foot, put it on the edge of the chair, hold the left thigh in place with my left hand to keep 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock even. Seek out the center point of my sacrum, lift from the bottom of the belly to the chest, and then turn the top of the thigh out. Whoa. And sometimes the body agrees, and sometimes you have to be patient and ask more than once. So breathe deeply there. So just the right muscles are being stretched that need to be stretched without allowing the sacrum to wobble. Mhm. So when there's too much movement, the muscles that are long and loose, and we'll come out of that pose now, the muscles that are long and loose are the ones that automatically stretch and release. So it's important to create stability to find the muscles that slip out of our consciousness that are maybe too short or too tight. All right, so that's that part, and we've got about 10 minutes left, and we're going to look at Virabhadrasana II. So that's a whole other gift about ways to work with your hips in piriformis without throwing your leg forward from down dog and bending over, right? Okay, so now let's go to Virabhadrasana II, which is, of course, an interesting pose. And I'm going to have to angle the camera up just a little bit. Okay, so in this case, let's look at the position of the hips. So very often in a yoga class, you'll hear the yoga teacher say, square your hips to the front of the room. And if you've heard that pose, that one instruction has caused more hip problems than any other single instruction in a yoga class, because it's absolutely eroding not only the stability of the SI joints, but also all the ligaments around the hip joint, causing hip problems. Okay, so when you turn that front leg out, don't square the hips. Turn the back foot in halfway, turn the front foot leg out 90 degrees, line up the heel to the arch, lift the bottom of the belly and level your clock face. So you've got to lift the front hip up, drop the back hip down, and then drop your tailbone to flatten your clock face so you've created stability here in the front of the belly. From there, you're going to lift the inside of the front knee and bend the knee down. All right, so I see I have to adjust the camera again. You all have to be patient with me. This is the first live stream, so hopefully I will figure out the spacing on this a little bit more. Okay, that's a little bit better. That's better. All right, so here I am again. Legs are apart, back foot is turned in, front leg is turned out 90 degrees. I've leveled my right hip by lifting, dropping the left, dropping the tail, flattening the clock face. So I'm using my transverse abdominis to contain the front of my sacrum. And I go into it more in depth in the course so you understand fully the anatomy to do that. And then lift the inside of the front knee like with an imaginary string, like you were a puppet, a marionette. Lift it up so it naturally throws some of the weight into the back leg, and then you should be able to glide down in Vira 2. Now, what happens very often if people square their hips, the thigh bone bumps into the hip bone, and you try and go down, and you can't go very far because your knee hurts, your SI joint hurts, or something is uncomfortable, right? So let's try the other side. I'm going to turn in halfway with my right leg, turn out 90 degrees with my left. I'm going to lift my left hip up, drop my right hip down, drop my tail, flatten my clock face so I have that support and stability in the front of the pelvis. Imaginary lift of the knee as I bend, and as you start to bend, you're going to notice two tendencies. One, for this front hip to drop back down again, which overstretches the pelvic floor on that side. And number two, that the belly dumps forward. And when it dumps forward, the buttocks pops out in the back. You've got to keep that buttocks down and under. You have to keep that thigh bone rotated completely, which means that for many people, you have to unsquare the hips. I'm glad I finally said that. Unsquare the hips and bend down so that you actually glide, because the head of the femur bone is in the center of the socket, and going up and down is no big deal. When you try and force the hips open, squared, going down is a big deal. And it's uncomfortable and it's not free. There's a loss of freedom. All right, let's try the other side one more time. And let's talk a little bit about the back leg. So we've leveled the hips right to left, drop the tail, flatten the clock face, and extend it down to the outside edge of the rear foot. And then inhale, and as you exhale, lift and bend the front knee, but then notice something. Notice what the sensation is on the inside of that groin of the back leg. And the question is the inner groin at the center of the pelvic floor? Is it back? Can you take that thigh back to the middle of the pelvic floor so that while you're stretching, there's no strain? That's the challenge with the strain. I'll show you from this side. From this side, the back leg, the tendency is for the back leg to fall and push forward. So that's the third problem, is dumping into the head of the femur bone or dumping the belly, right? Either one of those two things. Try and flatten the clock face, move that inner groin back, unsquare your hips, and then glide down into the pose and back up again. And from the front leg, last thing, when the knee bends, if the pelvis dumps, you get an angle at the hip, so the knee turns in and the buttocks pops out. You have to reverse that, turn the knee out, and bring the hip down and in, and then level the hips, unsquare them, and bend the knee into Virabhadrasana II. So that is the long and the short of it. So as a quick review, the mechanics of the piriformis stretch are dangerous. Rocking the hips in strap work without creating stability, and squaring the hips in Vira 2. So we want to unsquare the hips in Vira 2 and maintain the stability of the clock face. So I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for being with me on this live stream. I hope this has given you some food for thought and something you can add to your own practice. I'm going to go ahead and continue with my other class. There are, in the show notes, there are a couple links. There's a link for the new course coming up, and there's also a link for my website and my membership if you're interested. So thank you so very much for watching, and may your life continue to be blessed by yoga. Thank you. Namaste.